It just seems like I was just sworn in. But it is an honor to be with you. And again, I think that as I've looked and reflect back over the past almost really 3 years now, education in Georgia is really doing well. As both a candidate and as state school superintendent, I think that what I'm very proud of is that we came in a little 3 years ago with the mission. We came with the expectations. We came to say this is what we wanted to accomplish. And those things are getting done. I think one of the things I look at, we talked about during the election process that we wanted to make sure that education was more than a test. That it was actually now about our children once again. And we've been able to start making that transition. Working with the legislature, we've seen the largest reduction in mandated, high-stakes testing in our state's history. And that's something, again, where, again, just meeting with teachers yesterday, time and time again, is very thankful. Superintendent, we are so glad that we've been able to do this. And that's for the mere fact that you think about who was your best teacher, who was your favorite teacher that you had. Well, again, as I've shared with groups, I said, I do not know that individual. I may have probably, in all likelihood, have not met that individual. But what I can guarantee you is that individual had a relationship with you. And that's what our teachers should be about. I think for myself, as I was running, and as both an administrator and a teacher down in Irwin County, what I saw is that we began to have discussions in which the word child was taken out. Our children became data points, they became subgroups, they became percentages. They were basically numbers on a spreadsheet. And that had to change. And so we're, like I said, have made a great move in that by reducing that testing. And we're a little bit still above the national mandate, but for the most part, this has been a good change. And again, that has been well received throughout the teaching corps throughout our state. But also as we looked at, providing our kids with a great education, again, one of the things, I grew up in a military family. And one of the things which was extremely important to me is the area of literacy. I think literacy is the most important, skill that we can transfer to our kids. Giving them the ability to read, to understand. Because I don't care what class you go into, there's one common denominator. You've got to read. I don't care what test you take. One common denominator. You've got to read. And I don't care what job you go into. There's one common denominator to be successful, and that's you've got to read. And so we have been able to push forward and again to increase our reading scores throughout the state. There's a great focus on that. We actually have something we call our L4 or Literacy Plan for Georgia plan and initiative. Just recently, the state was awarded $60 million. Again, so we'll be $20 million for the next 3 years, in which we were able to resubmit, and only 3 states were able to do this to get actually the second grant. But it has impressed the individuals who are in academia, also in politics and across the nation of our plan, that they are looking at that. And so we are working together, getting industry, getting partnerships, engaged in that. And again, one of the things I've looked at as well is that we cannot act alone. The Department of Education is one entity, but I think as Attorney General spoke, this is not just a one entity issue. But these are things in which we have to be involving the community. We have to be involving individuals. And so we have begun that process. And again, that means that we as state agencies should be working together. In the area of literacy, again, we do a lot of great things with the public library system. Now, until 2 years ago when I came in, I was thinking, well, that's a natural marriage between us and the public library. Well, until 2 years ago, we weren't even dating, okay? That's kind of where we were in that. And so those are things that we're looking at and building those partnerships. But also over the past 2 years, we've been able to give out 200,000 books to many students who do not even have a book in their house, or the only book that they can claim to have is a phone book, okay? And so we are working with that, and hopefully this year we'll have about 500,000 books in which we'll be distributing throughout the state. So again, we're getting a lot of work with nonprofit, profit groups, again, to come in there and to support what we're doing. But also, as we talked about, moving away from this one-size-fits-all, giving our kids, opportunity. For many years across the state, we said that every child was going into a 4-year university. Now, I live in the real world, okay? That's not the real world. Again, my background is also in air conditioning and heating, technical school. I've worked in a cotton mill. I've worked in a peanut mill. I've been a janitor of a church. All work is beneficial, and it is something that we should value. And I think that, when we somehow got into this mode, based out of Washington when they released something called, No Child Left Behind, And we left a lot of children behind, to be honest. And that was because of that mentality. And we bought into that in the state of Georgia. Well, I can gladly say that that is not the case anymore. Across the state of Georgia, we are increasing our opportunities in our technical school program. And again, I'm not saying, you know, that the four-year universities are bad or by any means. They have a place. But also on the flip side, our technical education is very, very valued across the state. Right now, under the leadership of Dr. Barbara Wall, who is over what we call our CTAE team, basically dealing with this technical, the technical program, we are recognized as probably the number one, number two state as far as the nation when it comes to technical schools and technical education. People are looking at us, they are looking at how we do that. And again, because we wanted to really emphasize that, we put this part of what we call the whole child, within our state plan that we're presenting to the feds. Because we believe that education should be broad and it should be wide. We should not close down any education opportunities for our children. And so again, if you have not been to some of the schools and again looked at what's going on in technical education, you need to be out there. I mean, these kids are doing wonderful things. We have individuals who are graduating with industry certified credentials. That means they can go straight into the workforce. I think especially in the area of welding, I'm just giving you just one highlight. There are many, many different pathways that you can select. But especially in the area of welding, I mean, our young people are getting $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 as a starting pay. That's pretty good. It's more than a starting teacher makes. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of background with that. So we are continuing to expand those opportunities. Also looking at our children, again, we talked about trying to give them the very best. I believe children should have time to go out and play. It's okay to be a kid. Okay? It's okay not to be to really disassociate yourself with one of these things. Okay? And so right now we have a commitment from just about all of our elementary schools to give our children 30 minutes to go out and play and have a good time. Okay? And so those are things, and especially if you've been around young boys, giving them a little time to go out and burn some energy is not necessarily a bad thing. So again, that is one of the things we've looked at. Also, I'm a firm believer, as a former history teacher, in teaching American civics, teaching what is important. Right now, since we have made some changes with our social studies standards, we've increased American history in elementary age. Instead of 1 year, now they have 2 years of American history. So they get time to absorb and learn and not reach that. Again, my eventual goal, I would love to see 2 years of American history at the high school level as well. And again, that way we in conjunction with civics and government, again, we would have a good firm foundation. We're also looking now at having a badge that will allow schools and districts to take a citizenship test in conjunction with some other things, civic opportunities, in which they can get a badge and again show that, hey, I'm graduating, yet I can pass a citizenship test. I can do some things that reinforce the American exceptionalism. And so that's something that we are working on, and hopefully that will be rolling out in the near future. Within this time as well, again, fourth grade is the first time we have our fourth grader, or really our children are exposed to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. I work annually to give out pocket constitutions to that group. In fact, I was actually down in several schools this past week giving that out. And again, as the first year we were able to do that statewide. Again, that's based on funding, but that is not state funding. That is what we do from private donations. So it is my work to continue to do that I would love to make sure that is an annual thing, that each year that every fourth grader in the state of Georgia gets one of the pocket constitutions. They only cost 25 cents. So we've been able to work with a group actually out of the UGA Press to get that done. And so, we continue to do that, and within that, you have the Declaration of Independence, you have the Constitution, you have the Pledge to the Flag, you have the Star-Spangled Banner in its entirety. Not just we sing as our national anthem, but all of the verses and stanzas penned by Francis Scott Key. So again, we continue to look at that to reinforce those critical skills. But also one of the things I look at, across the state, and what we look at as a critical need for, preparing our kids for life. Again, moving away from what I looked at, and one of the things I ran on as well, is that for the first time we now have a personal finance course that can be offered to each and every child in the state of Georgia. Okay, that is extremely something we need to have. Our young people need to know how to manage money. Again, that's something, it's great that you can fill in A, B, C, D, or none of the above, but that's not the real life. I've never met an employer that's asked me, how well did you do on that test? But the one thing I do know is that whether you want to take, any course at all, personal finance is something we need to know. Our kids need to know how to invest, to buy a house, and especially, as they go off to college, again, whether it's a technical school or a university, the average debt right now of graduating, young folks is $28,000, okay? And I always share people, I said, that's great. You might not think about that as being a lot. And again, for Georgia, we're kind of a little bit on the lower end, but, for our, wages and stuff, that's a lot of money. But I do share with young folks of that, said probably about the time you're getting ready to graduate, you're probably wanting to put one of these little rings on you, okay? And that person who just said I do to you, they just gave you $28,000 as well, okay? So you start adding it up, that 28 has now become $56,000. And that's something that we've got to look at and, to do that. But in conjunction with that, I would share that one of the initiatives we have throughout the state is our dual enrollment, what we used to call Move On Ready, that right now you can leave high school with 2 years of credit. And that's 2 years of credit that is incorporated already in the funding mechanism. That's something you don't have to pay for. But if your grades are great enough and good enough, then that means you can add the Hope Scholarship on top of that, and you have your entire undergraduate degree paid for. Now, I don't care where you go, that's a great deal. That's something that, I think is an investment. And again, you think about as a young person. Now, instead of saying I owe $28,000 or $56,000, I'm starting my life, basically with my degrees that, has been taken care of. A lot of our young people are now even gaining high school credit in middle school. So again, opportunities that are looking at, across the board are extremely good. And I'll just kind of share and just kind of close with that. I mean, again, just to show you where Georgia is. Right now we have our highest graduation rate that we have had under our new scoring system. We are over 80%, right at 81%. By the year 2020, I expect for us to be, as a state, to be at or above, the national average. And to my knowledge, that will be the first time that we can ever say that. Our SAT scores, our ACT scores are, again, at all-time highs. And again, as you look at the national average, where they trend or are trending down, Georgia's going up. And that's even for our minority students. Okay, that's, again, we take a lot of people, a lot of our students take the SAT, a lot are taking, the ACT. And so on national comparison, we're doing some good things. A lot of great things that are looking at, people in Georgia are looking at us. And in fact, just to show you the eyes that are upon us, just recently the Department of Education was allowed to go up to the Department of Defense, and we were the only state allowed to present there. I mean, they're looking at some things that we're doing within education, especially in the area of computer science and looking at individualized learning, because it's something they're looking at how they train their military personnel. That, again, Georgia was the only state involved and invited. And so we are having some great conversations. There are other things I wish I could tell you. Like I said, I get to see the peak, the peak behind the curtain, but there are great things going on. Georgia's growing. We're doing things with business, and again, as we reach out, again, going back to the campaign, I recognize as a business person that we needed to make sure that we stepped out to talk with business and listen to what's going on. We hear, number one, that our young people need soft skills, and again, we're beginning to incorporate that. It's great that you show up for work, but it's even better that you show up on time, okay? And so, those are things that we look at in preparing our young people, what we're doing. So you're seeing some things, again, what I would say, at the end of the day, we're putting common sense back into education, okay? That was the one thing that somehow it began to kind of slip out. And unfortunately, what I've found that sometimes politics and common sense, they don't even live in the same house, okay? But it's time we put these things back together, because this is our kids, this is our, our livelihood, it's our future, for our young people. But things are going great. I'm excited, again, as I shared, because what I promised and what I said, this is the mission that's going on, we've been able to accomplish. And again, I tell people, I said, that door may close, or some doors may close, but that mission has not changed for me. A state school superintendent, I assure you, if it's on the radar, if it comes out of my mouth, it means that I'm going to work on it. It does not get forgotten and put off to the side, but it will continue to grow and move. So that's a little bit where we're at in education right now, and I appreciate your time. Again, since I am running for re-election, we do have some cards. I'd love for you to take, one of these or some of these and share. go to the website woodsforsuper.com. If you have any spare change you find in your couches, please donate. I know we have a lot of governor, candidates are out there, and competing candidates with that. But it does take a little bit to travel the state. Delaware looks good right now as far as state size. I think Chris, you're finding that out. So Georgia, like I said, of course, the only good thing I say, at least we're not Texas or Alaska. So I guess that's the bright spot. So I shouldn't complain too much. But again, it is a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure to be superintendent of the state of Georgia. I look forward to serving you another 4 years. And if I or the department can be of any service to you, please do not hesitate to reach out. Your voice is extremely important. It is who I represent, and I represent, our children as well. So, if there's any questions time, I'll be glad. If not, if you don't, then I'll be quiet. Yes, ma'am.